they were probably the most positive West Coast band. I mean, sincere, positive, and like really no malice, you know, no hidden agendas, you know, no bullshit.
INSTED were the significant hardcore band of 1990 in LA.
They were about their music, they believed in what they were saying, and so it's kind of like, at least in our area, when we were done, they kind of took over. It was kind of like a passing of the torch, for lack of a better term, where they kind of took over where we left off.
My introduction to hardcore was pretty much, I was 12 years old, my parents were getting a divorce and we were moving out, and my cousin's boyfriend at the time was going to help us move with a couple of his buddies. He ends up rolling up, and they're like these surf guys, and they happen to be playing Bad Religion, How Can Hell Be Any Worse? And I heard this record and I was like, this is insane, you know?
Going to Fender's and had met the guys in Doggy Style, and they were playing that night, and they opened up.
Started going to shows. It was punk shows, GBH, you know, Subhuman, stuff like that.
For me, there was this radio program on K-Rock called Rodney on the Rock, and it really exposed me to a type of music that I had never heard before, and it was so different and fresh and interesting to me, and it just drew me in.
Through high school, what caught my eye was bands like Uniform Choice, Minor Threat,
MIA, Youth Brigade in 7 seconds, and then I was sold from there. It was just like, you know, there's 1,500 people there. Everybody's going nuts for every single band, and they were all awesome. And it was just like, that was my first show. I was hooked.
You know, I was into like punk rock, like the Verukers and GBH and like all this English punk that was being played on the radio. And then, you know, I meet a guy like Kevin and a couple other guys that were his age, and just started piling all these local bands, come across a band playing live, Uniform Choice, and it's like, okay, wow.
A couple of guys from No Doubt, myself and Chris Webb, went to Anaheim High School, and some of the guys from INSTED went to Anaheim, obviously, and yeah, kind of came up at the same time, playing backyard parties in Orange County around the same time.
This group of guys, you know, had this band, and they would play these parties, and they were the punk band, the high school punk band, and they weren't good. They just weren't good.
I started playing this really cruddy, like, party punk rock band called Scheisskopf, And then at the same time, as Kevin was piling, and his friends were piling all this new music on me, we ended up starting to cover a local band, Doggy Style, Donut Shop Rock. And what would happen is Kevin would come in and start singing that song. And the more parties we played, the more popular that piece of the show got.
And back then, when we first started, like I said, playing parties, and I was straight edge, but the message was more just as a hardcore band. The message really wasn't straight edge. It was just as any hardcore band, and the issues that day-to-day issues that you face when you're 19 years old,
It was a friendship that evolved, and it evolved into a band of a bunch of guys who had similar tastes in punk and hardcore.
Billy, Tommy, me and Bear. We had a bass player named Chris who kind of filled in.
Record the demo. Our motivation was to get a demo into Zed Records in Long Beach, because that's where we bought our demos from other bands that we liked in the local scene, and things that we couldn't get hold of, or people that didn't have enough money to make records, or no one had any interest to put out their records. So that was our way of getting INSTED out there and see, it wasn't even let's see what we can do. It was like, hey, that's what you do. You make a demo and you put it in Zed Records.
I was at a UK sub show, and they used to do this song Stranglehold. So we all, three of us jumped on stage and we're singing Stranglehold with Charlie Harper. And the owner of Zed Records saw me with spiky hair and my leather jacket and said, I want him working at Zed Records.
Zed Records is calling 2 days later saying, hey, I'm out of demos. And we're like, we put 20 demos in there. So we had to make more demos. And the next thing I know, we were just every 2 days having to take 20 more demos down and 20 more demos down and 20 more demos down. And we were burning up our friends' tape players trying to dub off demos.
Played a lot of parties. It was grassroots in regards to, pulling up to the party or garage or what have it, wherever we're playing. And back of my trunk is a box with the INSTED demo.
Lou Dog, our drummer, actually used to play Little League with Kevin, and then he said, hey, this kid Kevin I know from Anaheim has this band, we should put him on a show. That's how I first actually met him, was because Lou Dog and Kevin used to play Little League together. That's how far back we go with INSTED. Orange County, we all grew up together.
That was the big deal. We were playing a show, where there was a PA system and a stage, and we'd get 5 people in on a guest list.
Getting out, playing in front of the right people, getting a show at Fenders, opening for Bad Brains, opening for Agnostic Front, doing all these things that I never had time to sit back and say, what's happening? It just was happening quickly.
I came around, saw INSTED probably late 80s maybe, at the Country Club or something like that, late 80s. And I was blown away, because I remember the first time I saw him, I was playing small shows in Orange County, and then just opened up, and then I went to see him at the Country Club, and it was like this full hardcore straight edge movement. I was blown away, hit the stage, kids were flying everywhere, and I was like, that was the night I went with Brian Baker from Bad Religion. That was the night some kid came up and threw a pie in his face at the INSTED show at the Country Club. Pretty funny night. Brian didn't think it's too funny though.
My first show was at Fenders, and Bad Brains was the headliner. And here I am at Fenders, never played on stage before. We're there for the sound check, and it sounded exactly like the record. It was incredible. The place is empty. I'm sitting there on the side of the stage, and I'm just totally freaked out, going, oh my gosh, there's 2,000 kids out front. They're going to be in here in no time, and we're going to be just thrown up on the stage and have to open this show.
I wasn't somebody just standing in the crowd anymore watching someone get their ass kicked at Fenders to, suicidal tendencies or whatever. We were actually participating in the background music for people to get their ass kicked to.
The demo was circulating. It's like, okay, we got to do the next step. We got to do a 7-inch. And Youth of Today had been out, and we played with them, and Ray wanted to put out the 7-inch. And we're like, oh, that'd be great, cool, that's what we're waiting for. So we're ready to go with that. We start moving forward with that, and then Wishing Well jumps in and says, if you do a 7-inch with Revelation, then you'll never be on Wishing Well.
And INSTED was one of those bands that started playing that type of music that was into the same ideas, wanted to make a difference in a positive way, and so they started playing music. So obviously being that it's a pretty small area, that we started hearing about them word of mouth. And then I saw a couple of their shows. I don't remember when, but I saw that it was the same type of energy that we were bringing. And then I think we played some shows with them, and it was just a really good mix and connection.
Wishing Well was saying, don't do a 7-inch, do a full album. I was like, oh shit, an album's better than a 7-inch, let's do that.
That was something that we could directly connect with. It was West Coast, Orange County. It was right there in our backyard. Revelation was just starting. There was only a couple of things out. Nobody really knew what was going on with it. And I remember my own thought process being, I'd rather have it right here where I can, have some sort of control over it, which it turns out I had no control over it whatsoever.
We didn't know what the hell we were doing. We knew how to play the songs, so we just played them, but we didn't know whether it sounded good or sounded bad.
So we go into the studio out in Venice Beach at a place called Radio Tokyo, where Uniform Choice was working on their classic, Staring at the Sun.
I guess it's like anything, you don't realize what you're a part of at the time.
At the time that we agreed to do this, Uniform Choice had started shifting their direction. Their band was evolving into something different. And unfortunately, they were trying to hitch our trailer onto that.
Whether it was the recording technique or getting more melodic takes on things. I mean, there was tries at Proud Youth slowdowns that were just ridiculous. Standing tall, we're still standing. I freaking remember it like it was yesterday. It was hell.
The most important thing to me was that they were real people. They were good guys, and they were solid. They fucking meant what they said and said what they meant.
It just kept getting delayed and kept getting delayed. Typical Wishing Well or typical punk rock. That's just the way it was.
I believe it was a year and a half, maybe closer to 2 years before that record came out.
I think right about then is when we started to get like distribution interest because of Uniform Choice. So we were able to get our records all over the country, but the problem was we couldn't fucking get paid for them. And that's then you're like in a difficult position because you're really dealing with what have become your friends, and you're damned if you do and damned if you don't. If they go on tour and they don't see the records anywhere, the records are nowhere. If they go on tour and see the records everywhere, they're like, our records are everywhere, we must be selling thousands and we're not getting paid. And it was somewhere in between. It's like the records were everywhere, nobody was selling thousands, and we weren't getting paid.
I mean, to have something in our hand that we did vinyl-wise was a big deal.
The record came out and we immediately went on tour. And then I just got a whole new perspective on what this was about.
When INSTED started in high school, it was Kevin, Steve, Tony, Tommy, and Billy.
To me, the band really started when Rich joined us. Primarily me and Bear decided, and Steve, that we were taking the band serious.
As you start to grow and get older and your band starts evolving, you start to realize, well, we don't really have the same ideas, we don't have the same goals.
We wanted to tour, we wanted to write music, we wanted to play a lot of shows.
I think in the back of our minds, me, Kevin, and Barry knew that things weren't right. We still had one of our wheels was still wobbly, and that was Billy. But we were all afraid to make the move on Billy, as cutthroat as that sounds, because Billy was a good guitar player and he was writing all the music.
We felt, we needed to be a tight unit. We needed to get someone to fit what we were trying to do.
Anybody else we had played with before knew a couple of songs, maybe, kind of. Can you guys show me the chord progression? Can you guys show me this? Oh, how many times does this part go? Rich knew every song. Didn't have to stop, it was like he was in the band the whole time. He knew every song, he played right along with us.
I joined in June of '88. The record came out, Bonds of Friendship came out in August of '88. I didn't record on it, but it still hadn't been out. And then as soon as it came out, we booked a tour and we were out on the road in September.
Went out by ourselves, and I remember, once again, this is grassroots. We're calling a guy, Johnny Stiff, in New York to book our tour. Never met the guy, talked to him a handful of times, and he's telling us where to play.
You book this thing via the phone. People are confirming, yeah, you guys can get on this show, and yeah, we're gonna have a show, so you guys can be on here, and we'll throw some bands on with you. It'll be a good time. And
bought a van, $1,000, put new tires on it, and borrowed money here and there, bought shirts.
Rich had established a friendship with Roger Murray from Agnostic Front, And we end up at Roger Murray's house and using it as a base camp. And the guy's calling in sick to work and hanging out with us. And to be honest, I can't believe it. I just can't believe how rad this guy from Agnostic Front is being to this little straight edge band from Southern California. We were playing for 20 people and we were playing for 100 people. It just depended on where we were and how well it was promoted, and it was exciting. I didn't know what to expect, and it was great. I was involved in something that I had been on the outside watching and admiring for a long time, reading Maximum Rock and Rolls, writing letters to bands, going to Zeds and Peer Records and buying whatever new came out because I liked the cover. I didn't know anything about it, or the MR&R guy, Tim Yohannan, wrote a good review on it or whatever, but I was immersed in it and now I was doing it, and it felt good to be a part of it.
The band wasn't a straight edge band, it was just simply a backyard punk rock hardcore band from Anaheim. And as soon as I joined the band, I felt like it became more of like a focused team of like, okay, this is a straight edge band, this is like a band that wants to actually make records and tour and do stuff. It's not just a backyard punk band anymore.
We come back from tour, we know the next step is, we got to put some new material together and get something else out there.
We wanted to do a 7-inch, 5 songs, and Wishing Well was kind of going a different route. They were kind of putting out, I think, like Vic Bondi and stuff like that.
Big Frank is one of the people I will say that I feel was a key part of helping INSTED become a national band.
Big Frank, we want to do this 7-inch with you, and it's like, great, let's get you in the studio next week, I'll have it out by the end of the month. And literally, that's what happened.
I basically would just let them give me whatever they did, and I was happy with the way it sounded. I pretty much accepted whatever bands gave me. If I was going to do a 7-inch with them and they liked the way it sounded, there usually wasn't a problem.
The sound was a little stronger. I think the vocals were a little stronger. I think the 7-inch with the pictures and everything was, just the whole package was stronger.
We also were getting heavily influenced by New York at the time, because Youth of Today was big and the whole New York scene was far bigger than the Orange County scene at that time. So I think that's reflected in the 7-inch.
Once the Uniform Choice moved on, INSTED probably had it to themselves for a while.
We flew out to the East Coast for I think it was 10 days.
Looking back on it, what were we thinking, But I remember distinctly sitting with Kevin and figuring out, okay, look, Kev's dad can lend us this money, we can make this many shirts, we're definitely going to sell this many shirts, so there's going to be this much money to cover the plane tickets. Boom. Vision had agreed to pick us up at the airport and do this tour with us. And so we were basically using all their gear. And so basically what it was costing us was plane fare.
I was in the studio with someone, because a lot of my bands recorded at Epitaph's West Beach studios, and I told Brett, I go, would you want to do a Carrie Nation full-length album? He's like, well, maybe. I already knew that he was interested in INSTED. He was more into punk rock than hardcore, but he wanted to put out a hardcore band. And I realized it was either going to be INSTED or Carrie Nation. And I kind of just put him on the spot. I was like, do you want to do us? Just tell me yes or no. And he's like, I don't think I'm going to do you. I'm going to do INSTED. And that was that.
I was playing full-time in the band and also running the label, so trying to do both. And I remember that INSTED opened for us a couple times.
INSTED plays with Bad Religion. He sees that this band obviously has got some sort of a following.
Our merchandise, back to the merchandise, set up next to their merchandise was selling like 10 to 1. Brett Gurewitz had also noticed that people reacted a lot more strong to our show than theirs. So somehow he gets hold of Kevin the next day.
Brett Gurewitz called me. I remember I was just sitting in my room and the phone rang, and it was Brett, and I kind of had to piece it together.
We were kind of lost at the moment. What's our next move? We know we've got to do an album. We'd like to do it with, the best person possible. And then Epitaph showed an interest.
Now we're in a weird spot, because now we're like, we don't have any demos of any new stuff. We had started writing, but we didn't have anything. All we had was like a boombox, hit record in the rehearsal room, And so when he called Brett back, he let him know that, because Brett had said at some point in the conversation that he'd like to hear some of the new stuff. And he said, that's fine. I can hear what I need to hear off a tape like that. And we're just like, whatever.
I couldn't compete with Epitaph. I didn't have the distribution. I mean, Epitaph was seen as a launching pad.
We were a little stressed out because we signed some contracts and we knew it was time to do a record, and I think we had 1 or 2 new songs ready to go, and we signed this contract, and Brett goes, okay, great, this is what we're gonna do. I want to get it out. Let's pull out the calendar and block off some recording dates. And you know, it's like, how about in 3 weeks? I was like, dude, I've only got 1 new song. I need a little bit more time than that. So he goes, oh, you've only got, it was either 1 or 2 songs. Okay, you've only got 2 new songs? All right. Okay, 8 weeks. And at that time it was like so intimidating. It was like, okay, that sounds good.
It wasn't like we signed with them because we were getting a bunch of money, or we were like separating ourselves from the straight edge scene, or it had nothing to do with simply they asked us if we wanted to do a record.
He was a fun guy to work with. He was energetic. He was interested in what we were.
Kev, instead, you know, snuck around behind me in the restaurant and pantsed me, right?
We were in a falafel place. Brett was standing there, and Kevin dropped his drawers while he was standing there looking at the menu board, and he was wearing these freaking navy blue they might as well have been a G-string. I swear to God, they were so small. But he took it like a champ. He just stood there calmly, kept looking at the menu. At some point, leaned down, picked up his pants, pulled them up. Never really said too much about it. We loved it.
A couple days later, Kevin comes to the studio with his brand new white Ford Explorer.
While we were recording one evening, that he had spray painted Kevin's 4Runner, his white 4Runner with black spray paint.
I think one of the first things I wrote on it was "Eat meat." I think the hood had a giant swastika on it. I think the doors had giant anarchy symbols on it. The entire back of this Ford Explorer said "Fuck the pigs." It said "Take drugs."
Kevin was almost in tears.
Some rough spots in regards to being prepared, maybe.
That's what the experience was like. It was really family-like.
I wanted to let him stew for a while, but I couldn't. So I said, "It's no big deal. Check it out." See, it comes off. It's not really spray paint. It's like, oh!
It was the first day it was released, and they had 1 phone. I don't know. It might have even been a dial phone. I don't know, but maybe it was push button. I don't remember, but it was just ringing off the hook, and we ended up shipping 11,000 copies the first day. They were putting out like press kits, you know, look for this record, and this is, you know, all this stuff. Against the Grain came out on the same day, and so it was a dual release for Epitaph, and they shipped like 60,000 the first day.
When INSTED came out on Epitaph hadn't signed Offspring. They hadn't signed Rancid. I hadn't even heard of Rancid at that point.
And we're driving down Melrose or something, and there's just INSTED posters everywhere. And it was kind of cool because it was INSTED, Janet Jackson, and REM.
We end up in the studio recording with Brett, you know, make a record and book a European tour, and Desert Storm breaks out.
We were at war, and so it was kind of a weird time to be flying and sending electronics over and things like that.
So we said, no, Europe's not going anywhere, so let's do a U.S. tour.
We just turned it into another American tour, which we probably literally booked in 15, 20 days.
I was trying to book the tour myself, and somebody said, oh, you should call this girl Stormy in Salt Lake City, Utah, and she'll help you with it.
Chris did most of the work. Kev will claim he did, but he didn't. But he was way organized. He just had it all lined up, and we felt like seasoned veterans going out now.
We didn't have a trailer, and I remember having my dad build a loft for the back of this beater Dodge van, and strategically building it so there was enough room for people to sleep on top and put the gear underneath, and then in any spare inch of the van we had t-shirts tucked almost like insulation.
I remember having a firework fight with Gorilla Biscuits one time. as we're driving down in Green Bay, Wisconsin, or in Wisconsin somewhere.
The record was out. It was doing well. It was in all the stores. We knew all the hot spots across the country. We're rolling into all the towns and recognizing faces and all that. And it wasn't, 50, 60 kids anymore. It was 300 on a Wednesday night.
All the bands we were playing with at the time, or the bands that were coming through, or the records that were coming out, were this new style of hardcore that we didn't associate with. We were associated ourselves more with like a Uniform Choice or a 7 Seconds or a Minor Threat. And this new stuff had a different sound. We felt like we didn't fit in, really.
You could see that with the opening bands. In the past it was just, hardcore, 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 and then we would play and it would be more hardcore. Well, then towards the end there, it was different. The music was just changing, which it needed to, and it was. So
being in the band, we went hard from day one. I mean, it wasn't, hey, let's take 6 months off, or so-and-so's in another band, he's on tour, so now we can take a break for 6 months. It wasn't like that. I mean, it was go, go, go.
Hardcore was making a change, and it was a change that I really wasn't very interested in. And I think the band talked about it pretty freely too, which I guess ultimately ended up, had us end up where we decided, hey, you know what, this is it.
By 91, we were talking about, we should probably, step out. This is a good time for us to duck out. We're kind of at the top of our game. We've done some touring, some records. We've kind of met some goals we wanted to. We've had a good run, met some great friends, and things are changing, times are changing. Let's maybe step down, give some of these newer bands, let's just kind of get out of the way.
I don't remember which one of the two of them brought it up, but either Bear or Kevin just was like, you know what? I'm just really not into this anymore. And I remember just kind of being taken aback by it a little bit, like, what do you mean?
And mainly, maybe at the time, it was me. I was getting married, and I had been doing the band 5 years, a little tired, and so then we met after the tour, after practice, and talked about our last show.
I know for me personally, and I'm sure I can speak for the other guys too, we just didn't have what we had before, and that was the energy and the commitment to do what we had been doing the previous 5 years.
The last show for INSTED, we specifically, once we determined that it was time for us to quit, we decided just to do a real simple local show, not advertise that it's our last show like most people would want to, get the most people there and have it at this big venue and this and that. And for us, it was kind of the opposite. It's kind of like, let's just do a standard show as if we're doing a show. Our normal people that are going to like us are going to go, and we'll just say it's our last show.
It was a packed house. I mean, it wasn't hard to pack Spanky's, but they way overfilled that place in the first place, and we definitely had no business playing a place that small. And there were people that opted not to go to that show because it is a small venue, and you knew there was going to be a lot of people, and a lot of people were going to get turned away.
A lot of our friends that were there were really bummed. They thought we were kind of joking, and we're just like, no, this is it, man. The time's up,
And honestly, I look back on our last show, and it was probably one of my, if not my favorite INSTED show.
Normally when a band breaks up, it's like, oh, Joey and Jimmy, they fought every time. They had to stand in separate corners of the room. For us, it was not. We were really, really close friends, and we just decided collectively that it was time to get out. Kev ended up getting married shortly after we broke up. That was one of his things was he got married, and shortly after that moved out of state, went to Colorado.
It was a time in my life that, to this day, the things that I did back then have shaped me who I am today.
Kevin was a very positive person. They all were. Everybody in INSTED, there wasn't a negative bone in their bodies as far as I could tell.
We all kind of just grew up. We stayed friends, and like I said, me and Steve have pretty much been playing music consistently since 1988.
I wanted to be in a band. I definitely wanted to do that. Did I expect to do with it what I did? No, not at all. It wasn't the intention. which is I think what makes it that much sweeter to me too, looking back and saying, man, that happened so quick, but at the same time it was so pure and fun.
You stop playing like that, sometimes you take things for granted until they're gone, and you realize you're just like, wow, we played for 5 years, all those shows, how fun it was, and then you don't do it for so long, and you look back and you just each day and you look back at that, you just go, wow, how fortunate we were.
It was just a blast, and it was just a sweaty mess when it was all over.
All right, number one, we'd like to thank everyone that supported us over the years. All right, appreciate it. This is INSTED's last show. People are saying why. Simply, okay, reason being, for us as individuals and as a band, there's nothing for us to give back to hardcore. We put out the records, the tours, over 200 shows. We appreciate everything. We're not going to stick around, milk it, play shows, big shows for money. That's not what we're about. This is our last show. We appreciate it. It's been great. Enjoy it. We love you. This one's called Live and Let Live. All right, let's get some room here. We got a lot of songs tonight.